A critic writing of Jacqueline Bisset recently described her as a great beauty who, as it turns out, is also a woman of great substance. Jacqueline has been leading lady for more than 20 years now in films that include The Deep, Rich and Famous, Day for Night, and Under the Volcano. Her newest film is called Dangerous Beauty, and I'm pleased to welcome Jacqueline Bisset to CBS, and thanks for coming over tonight. You live in America now, but you were brought up in England, I read this afternoon, in a house that was 400 years old.
Yes.
With a weird roof. Tell me about
thatch
this.
roof.
Thatch.
Yes. It's an amazing thing that it works. The thatch, it was about that thick. Mm-hmm. And I've recently had it rethatched, so now it's about that thick.
And when it gets wet, when it rains,
the rain doesn't come in.
It doesn't come through,
no.
But doesn't the dampness allow things to live in there that you might not want to have running around in your roof? What lives in a thatched roof?
Well, you get little mice and stuff. Yeah. You get mice and you get the odd squirrel. And you hear them scratching around in the eaves.
But do they ever come down into the rooms, or they just
stay? When we were children, we had the odd mouse. Yeah, squirrels, no. But I've left the house empty at times, and the squirrels have got into the house. And they have chewed everything desperately to get out. Chewed the windows, chewed everything, the furniture, absolute disaster.
Funny, they work so hard to get in, and now they can't wait to get out.
They came down the chimney, because the chimneys are enormous, you know. Chimneys are really, really big. I mean, you can see right up to the top without any problem.
And so you were growing up, if my chronology is right, after the war in Great Britain. And what was it like after the war? I remember as a boy here, we would mark the day that you could get sugar again in the grocery stores, you know, that Mom didn't have to get out a ration coupon.
Yeah, well, we had rationing for sure.
And meat came back, and chocolate came back, and all those things after the war.
Well, I remember somebody sending us a care package from America. I don't know who it was. I haven't quite figured out who that was, but I remember a couple of packages. And I remember opening this sort of package and a few things in there. I don't remember what specifically, but there were sort of tins and stuff. And I wasn't aware of what it was like before, so I just thought it was fun to get a package.
And your father, as I read, was a doctor, and he would go. He was not an in the office doctor, but he would go out and work with his patients, serve his patients. Really?
No, he'd start the morning give a surgery, and there was no appointment system. There were just many people. He had like 3,000 patients. That's the system. And they worked incredibly hard. I mean, and made very little money. I mean, the national health system was really badly paid. And he'd go and deliver babies at 2 in the morning quite cheerfully, and he loved medicine. He just didn't like he didn't want private patients, because he didn't want to have long kind of chats with rich ladies who weren't sick. So
who saw a visit to the doctor as a social event rather than something else. And
he was very handsome.
And what kind of a man was he? Was he a taskmaster with you and your brother?
A bit. But his advice has really honestly been incredibly valuable to me, because I was a frightfully self-conscious child.
Really?
Well, you know that stage when you become self-conscious, and he just said to me, if you're self-conscious, it's just conceited and being, you know, it's all very self-involved, and you've got to get rid of that, and, you know, nobody's looking at you. And I said, but they are, Daddy, they are looking. He said, no, they're not. He said, they're thinking about themselves, and they just want you to look at them. So he said, if you look at them, take an interest, they'll, you know, he just taught me a lot of stuff like that.
And did he talk much about current events? Was he involved?
Very much.
Oh, really? Talking about after the war and Europe and stuff like that?
Well, it wasn't that so much that he talked about current events, but he was terribly people-oriented, and he tried to train me to ask questions and to be interested in everything. And he said, you're going to lose your looks, that's for sure.
Oh, thanks, Dad.
He said, your looks have nothing to do with you anyway. Your mother and you know, you have nothing to do with your looks. It's genetic. And he said, the first thing you ought to do is get interested in other people. And he said, if you're interested in other people, you will always have friends, and you will always be attractive to other people. And gosh, I thought that was incredible to say that, because he said, you know, what's important in a woman is that, not that you be beautiful, but you be attractive as a human being. And he said, warmth will always attract people. And I think it's true.
Good advice.
Very good advice.
Now, your mother was an attorney, a lawyer, before she married your father.
Yeah.
And she came from France.
Well, she was English, but she was raised in France. She went to university in France, and she had an English governess when she was. She didn't actually. It's funny. She didn't go to school as such. She was brought up in kind of a very strict way. Her mother died when she was very young, so she was kind of brought up.
And what was your schooling like? Did you go to private school?
You know, English private school, stuffy.
Boarding school, or
no? I didn't go to boarding school. I was a fanatic about ballet, and I wanted to go to classes afterwards. So I would go traipse into a town where there was a little ballet class, and I would wander home. You know, it was all rather actually quite frightening at night because I was always wandering around in the dark at night. But I was so into this ballet stuff, and so I didn't become a boarder, and my parents had no desire to make me a board anyway.
And what were your mother's interests? You mentioned that, you know, your father had an interest in current affairs and your father liked people. What were your mom's
Well,
interests?
they were both very intelligent, but in completely different ways. My mother was really interested in music, and she always took me to art galleries, and when we could afford it, she'd take me up to London to go and see really good ballet. And she always played classical music at home. And my father was into jazz and sports and people. So they were very much at odds, actually.
There was a line in your biography that your mother, by bicycle, fled the Germans, that she rode a bicycle to safety.
Yeah, well, she was living in Paris at the time, and when the Germans arrived, they wanted to get out. Her father was in England, and she didn't know when she'd see him again. And she and a friend, God knows where they got the bicycles from, but they cycled like 300 miles and to the coast and got on one of the last boats over. And were kind of, you know, well, at that time, everybody has a story, but I was fascinated by that whole thing. I mean, they were shot at, and they managed to get on this last boat over to England.
And to safety, right.
Safety, yeah.
Now, at 15 years of age, when you were 15, your mom became ill. And so all of a sudden, as you've said in other interviews, your childhood came to an end because...
Well, it didn't come to an end, but it just, I was such a surprise, and I couldn't really believe what was happening, because she'd never really been sick before that. She just had the odd migraine. So everything changed, yes, everything changed, but I still had some fun.
Okay.
I mean, it didn't come to an end in one way, but I had that responsibility, which was there, and I had to always deal with that, put that first.
And what happened to your mom? What happened to her?
Well, she's doing brilliantly. She's doing really well. She's had some very rough times, and she's doing really well at the moment.
But when you were 15, what?
Well, she was paralyzed, and then she went blind for a bit, and that came back, and then her eyes were affected more or less forever, but fine. And sometimes her arms she couldn't use her arms, and sometimes, but basically with MS, you know, your balance is terribly affected. But I was stunned by the way what they gave her, because the medication they were giving her, I finally said, I'm going to take her off the medication. I don't know what it is, but I'm taking her off it because it's not working. And it turned out she'd been put on Valium and diuretics, because her legs were very swollen at this time. And
Maybe
so
the
I got her
last
off.
thing that you would give somebody.
Well, it's very strange. I mean, it was a very good doctor who gave, but he said to me finally, he said, you know more about this because you're living with her than I do. So I said, well, it seems to me she gets her diet's frightfully important. I noticed whenever she ate like I did, she'd be better. I mean, that was partly because I was there, and it was psychological probably to be taken care of.
Sure.
But I see such a correlation between diet and feeling good.
No question, you know.
I mean, to a point that I'm stunned that people are not taught this in school. I think people should be taught nutrition in school. I mean, really heavily be taught it. Preventative medicine, I just don't believe in all this. I was doctors, my whole family, my father's family were all doctors, but I must say, with all due respect to him, I feel that the natural way is really quite good.
So when you went to work to make some money, your first jobs, as I was told, were in modeling.
Well, I started doing waitress jobs and, you know, stuff like that, and I sort of skipped out of school and took an odd job because I had some debts. Didn't get caught there, but I got caught later, but, you know, skipping school, but I had to do that. So actually my father was really happy that I'd done these things, because he said, oh my God, I see a grain of independence. He said, that's good. He said, that's good. He said, and also I won't have to spend any more school fees if you get independent.
So when I come back from the break here, how you went from these odd jobs, you became a model for a while,
well,
and that led to acting?
I tried to be a model. I tried to get some pocket money together because I didn't have any money, and I wanted to go to acting school. I didn't want to be a model. I knew it was completely wrong for a model. I had curly hair. I was a bit fleshy. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't even know how to put hair rollers in my hair. But people were kind of nice to me, and they thought I looked kind of Italian in those days. I had a sort of earthy look, and actually I could probably do it much better now, because I'm a bit thinner than I was then, but I was definitely not the right shape. And people tried to give me jobs. They said, oh, Jackie, you know, you look like the outsize model. We can't use you for this, you know. Looks like the big girl.
Well, you certainly trimmed down.
Well, it wasn't a matter of much, but I was, you know, round.
I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I used to be a little round myself. Jacqueline Bisset is here. Her newest picture is called Dangerous Beauty, which we will get to, and we'll join you on the toll-free right after this break. With Jacqueline Bisset, here is Scott on the toll-free in Woodstock, New York. Hello.
Hi, Tom. How you doing?
I'm doing
Jacqueline.
fine, Scott. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be on.
Thank you.
I've been mad about Jacqueline for 30 years and waited for this. I was wondering if since she made the conscious decision over the years not to have children, if she felt that gave her more of a sense of control over her life than, say, her friends who have had children.
Well, it's not really that I made a conscious decision, you know. It's like life comes along as it comes, and you have to cope with what you have to cope with, and I've had a pretty full plate of things to handle. So I don't know. Sometimes I think maybe I'm going to miss that, but you can't have everything.
Well, I don't have children myself, so I've had friends of mine at the age of 45 say to me that they felt in some ways that I was lucky or fortunate.
Yes, people do say that sometimes. They feel that you're having more freedom. People are really into their own trips. I don't feel I don't feel that some people make that decision because they really don't want to deal with that. I've just felt like I couldn't cope with any more than I had to cope with, really. Has been my story, really. It's not that I mean, I like children. I never thought I'd be a frightfully good mother, but I actually think maybe now I begin to think maybe I would be better than I thought I would have been. I was very...
And why would you think that you wouldn't have been a good mom?
Well, because I was always working frightfully hard and doing things, and I was sort of impatient, and I'm very quick at doing things, and I thought, I don't know if I could have that kind of patience to... But I'm an affectionate person, you know, I'm a warm person. It's not, I just...
Well, now you told me in the break, and I'll give this little intimacy that we share called Old English Sheepdog. we both have Old English Sheepdogs.
Yes.
As you know, they require a great deal of patience.
Great.
Far more than my daughter required.
Really?
Yes, far more.
Oh, I don't think he needs patience. I don't feel patient. My dog is just an absolutely... He gives me a lot of love, and he's truly a sweet spirit. I mean, I don't feel any... walking him, maybe, is a bit... But, you know, but he takes care of himself pretty much.
Yes, they do.
They do.
But I can tell you that if you can handle an Old English Sheepdog, you can be a mom.
Really?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, you should have told me that a while ago.
Well, yeah,
I've
but
only had my dog
I
2
didn't know you then, you know. Scott, I'm glad you called, and thank you for watching us tonight.
Well, thank you both very much.
All right, good night, sir.
Take care.
So you had success in Europe, and then you came to America in the 1960s.
No, I didn't have any success in Europe when I started. I'd just done a couple of little bits, you know. I'd just done little bits.
Yeah, but you caught the eye of 20th Century Fox.
Yes.
Because they brought you here.
But I was on the verge of starting. They caught me before I started, really. I just did a thing in Two for the Road with Audrey Hepburn.
What a great picture. Albert Finney.
Yeah. And
the little Mercedes-Benz car driving around.
Yes.
And he would look at her and say, bitch, and she'd look back at him and say, bastard. Great, great movie. Do you think I don't remember these things, huh?
Well, you remember more than I do.
Well, probably.
I just remember the 5 hairdos of Audrey. It's the only time you knew where you were in the story, because her hairdo told you where you were, whether it was a forward jump or back jump, because it was so confusing. It was really, and just, I thought she was just a beautiful creature, sweet creature.
So you came to America, and from what I read, you were among the last to be signed as part of the studio star system.
Well, actually, I didn't sign. They asked me to sign, and I said no, and they offered me a picture deal, which just seems incredible now. They asked me to sign exclusively, and I said no. I heard it wasn't a good idea to be owned by anybody. I just heard that kind of little bit of detail.
Okay.
So I said no. They said, really? I said no. And they said, well, we want to offer you a 10-picture deal. As I say it, I can't believe it as I say it. So basically, the deal was that I was under contract to 20th Century Fox, and I got paid very little in the beginning, and each year, if they kept me, they had the option to drop me. They did drop me in my 6th year, just at the point that I was going to start to make some money. So I was a bit disappointed about that. But they didn't hold me to some of these films that they were doing that I didn't want to do. They were very, very courteous, and when there were sort of projects, I said, I don't think you really want me to do that. I really don't want to do that.
Like, what was one that you really didn't
Well, there were just sort of films that were just not me at all. There was a few films, and I can't remember the names of them, but I didn't do them.
Does the title The Sweet Ride mean anything to you?
Yes, it's my first Hollywood film. That was okay. It was fine. It was a big part, and I got to be, you know, be in a major B movie, I would call it, and I got to see what it's like, and I enjoyed all the work. I mean, I just enjoyed working. So I didn't enjoy some of the publicity things I was asked to do, and I'd say, I don't want to do that. And they'd say, okay.
Now, I remember reading back in the 70s, a picture came out called The Deep, based upon a book written by Benchley.
Yeah.
And you were complaining about some picture of you in a wet T-shirt that was unauthorized. What was that all about?
Exactly that.
Because they used that picture. I mean, I can see it now. They used it to promote the movie.
I know, but it was not
Peter Benchley, right?
Yeah.
The Deep, yeah.
Well, you know, you get photo approval, and I had photo approval in that picture. Those pictures were never approved.
You see, that's the thing I need to ask for here is photo approval. I never got photo.
Well, it was a real shock, I tell you.
Well, I mean, how bad could it be?
Well, it was pretty bad. I thought it was pretty bad. I mean, I specifically chose not to do that kind of publicity, not to do pictures of myself. And if I, you know, I really don't want to talk about The Deep. It was very positive ultimately because it put me in a bigger scale, but I really didn't. It was not my thing, you know. I mean, so everybody has their thing, and pin-up stuff wasn't my thing.
Gotcha, gotcha. Do you feel that, you know, your father told you that how you look is not so important as the kind of person you are? And yet you've been described by critics and people who are knowledgeable about motion pictures as one of the great screen beauties of all time. Can being attractive, can being beautiful get in the way of your work? Would you be offered parts based upon the way you look and not so much on your ability as an actress? You know what I'm saying here? That they say, well, you know, she's great looking, she'd be great for this part, but this other part, well, she's just a looker, she's not really a great actress.
I don't feel people said that. I don't know. I mean, the people who hired me in the beginning, they were good directors, basically. I tested for things and I got the parts, you know. I got some, didn't get some. But I felt completely relaxed about it. I didn't feel I was being hired. Now, people can always come in and say, you know, sour grapes, you were cast. But I didn't have that feeling about myself. I didn't think of myself as pretty. I had tremendous complexes. And I was always working on the inside development of my person, you know, the person I was. And I just didn't... I saw gorgeous women all over California. In fact, I was incredibly intimidated by... I lived at the beach, and I used to see these incredible California beauties leaping up the beach, followed by dogs, you know, running, running, and you see them streaming hair.
And all with perfect teeth and streaming hair.
And I'd say, my God, I'm never going to go out there. I just wouldn't be seen. I just stayed in the house and cooked and sunbathed when there was no one around. I was completely traumatized by this. And it sounds, people say, you're nuts, but that's the way I was. That's the truth. Now, and I see young people just like me, and I go, my God, they're missing their youth by they're worried about the way they look. I say, for God's sake, you know, enjoy yourself. Enjoy yourself. I missed a lot of fun things by being silly like that.
In this film that's out now, Dangerous Beauty, you play a mom, and her daughter has a problem.
She has a problem. I play a woman who was a courtesan in 1560 in Venice, and I used to be a courtesan. I'm now a married woman with 2 children, and the point is the family is now out of money, and it was a time when women had virtually no alternatives. They could be married if they had enough money, because they had to pay their husband the dowry.
The dowry, right.
Our family was out of funds, and my daughter thinks that she's going to marry this nice nobleman who she's been used to being in love with, and I tell her she can't marry him. She has to become a courtesan, and if she's a courtesan, she's not going to get married, basically. But she can love him, but not in marriage. And she has to face reality, and I train her. I try and teach her about men. I try and teach her about... well, actually, I take her to the library. The first thing I do is I take her to the library, because the courtesans were allowed to study, and the wives basically had very basic education. You know, little Italian, little maths, Bible studies, jam making, that kind of thing.
Jam making.
Jam making, preserves. And she's already got a little touch of information, because I have given her the odd book in her childhood. So she's ready for this, and this aspect pulls her in, because she figures she could become a whole human being. And being a courtesan at the time was actually what would be considered a chance at having a real emotional and important life.
Well, don't give away the surprise ending.
I'm not going to give away anything. You've just frightened me.
Well, I don't mean to do that. I thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
A pleasure to see you again. And the picture is called Dangerous Beauty. The star is Jacqueline Bisset.
No, Catherine McCormick is the star.
Catherine McCormick.
Catherine McCormick and Rufus Sewell. And they are the principal actors in it.
My dear, when you're sitting in that chair and I say you're the star, you are the star.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're very welcome. It's nice to have seen you again. Thanks. Jacqueline Bisset is the guest. The picture is called Dangerous Beauty. We'll be right back with the amazing story of Kathy Eldon and her son Dan after these messages.
Chimney, because the chimneys are enormous, you know. Chimneys are really, really big. I mean, you can see right up to the top without any problem.
And so you were growing up, if my chronology is right, after the war in Great Britain. And what was it like after the war? I remember as a boy here, we would mark the day that you could get sugar again in the grocery stores, you know, that Mom didn't have to get out a ration coupon.
Yeah, well, we had rationing for sure.
And meat came back, and chocolate came back, and all those things after the war.
Well, I remember somebody sending us a care package from America. I don't know who it was. I haven't quite figured out who that was, but I remember a couple of packages. And I remember opening this sort of package and a few things in there. I don't remember what specific. I've recently had it rethatched, so now it's about that thick.
And when it gets wet, when it rains,
the rain doesn't come in.
It doesn't come through, but doesn't the dampness allow things to live in there that you might not want to have running around in your roof? What lives in a thatched roof?
Well, you get little mice and stuff. You get mice and you get the odd squirrel. And you hear them scratching around in the eaves.
But do they ever come down into the rooms, or they just stay?
When we were children, we had the odd mouse. Yeah, squirrels, no. But I've left the house empty at times, and the squirrels have got into the house. And they have chewed everything desperately to get out. Chewed the windows, chewed everything, the furniture, absolute disaster.
Funny, they worked so hard to get in, and now they can't wait to get out.
They came down the...
A critic writing of Jacqueline Bisset recently described her as a great beauty who, as it turns out, is also a woman of great substance. Jacqueline has been a leading lady for more than 20 years now in films that include The Deep, Rich and Famous, Day for Night, and Under the Volcano. Her newest film is called Dangerous Beauty, and I'm pleased to welcome Jacqueline Bisset to CBS, and thanks for coming over tonight. You live in America now, but you were brought up in England, I read this afternoon, in a house that was 400 years old.
Yes.
With a weird roof. Tell me about this.
Thatch roof.
Thatch.
Yes. It's an amazing thing that it works. The thatch, it was about that thick. And I just didn't like he didn't want private patients, because he didn't want to have long kind of chats with rich ladies who weren't sick. So he was
who saw a visit to the doctor as a social event rather than something else.
And he was very handsome.
And what kind of a man was he? Was he a taskmaster with you and your brother?
A bit. But his advice has really honestly been incredibly valuable to me, because I was a frightfully self-conscious child.
Really?
Well, you know that stage when you become self-conscious, and he just said to me, if you're self-conscious, it's just conceited and being, you know, it's all very self-involved, and you've got to get rid of that. But there was all tins and stuff. And I wasn't aware of what it was like before, so I just thought it was fun to get a package.
And your father, as I read, was a doctor. And he would go, he was not an in-the-office doctor, but he would go out and work with his patients, serve his patients. Really?
No, he'd start the morning, give a surgery, and there was no appointment system. There were just many people. He had like 3,000 patients. That's the system. And they worked incredibly hard. I mean, and made very little money. I mean, the national health system was really badly paid. And he'd go and deliver babies at 2 in the morning quite cheerfully, and he loved medicine.